Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure to be here. Um, my name is Mario Molina. I'm the executive director at Protect Our Winters, POW. We are an organization that is working to mobilize the outdoor sports community towards effective bipartisan solutions on climate change. And what I've been asked to talk to you about today and talk to the group about today is the work that we've done over the last couple of years on turning passion into purpose. Basically, how do we effectively communicate on climate change for the outdoor sports community? So we're going to run through some of the research that we did and what the key takeaways were of that research, including the demographics of our community and their intentions and their passions and their lifestyle choices and then can we leverage those and mobilize those in order to turn passionate people into advocates for climate. And then we'll transition from that into talking about the message architecture and the messaging pathways that we believe are effective to accomplish that goal. And we'll wrap up. I'll try and wrap up relatively quickly because I don't particularly like just talking into a screen that reflects back at me. So I'll try and wrap up relatively quickly so that we can have ideally a good Q&A session. So thank you so much again for joining. I see a couple of known names in the attendees, and those of you that I don't know, it's a pleasure to have you. So let me start by giving a little bit of a history as to how this work actually got started. Protect Our Winters, in 2019, we embarked on a journey really to better understand what motivates the members of our community, the outdoor community, to become advocates for the environment, and what are the challenges that they face along that journey. So over the next 15, 20 minutes, I'm going to share those findings and those key takeaways. And really, if your brand or business wants to align its messaging with the community's values on climate and the environment, I'm going to encourage you to dig a little bit deeper by downloading the executive summary of our report and or contacting us directly at Protect Our Winters for more information. There will be a QR code at the end of this presentation that you can scan with your phone, and that will send you directly to the download link for the executive summary of the report. And why should we as entrepreneurs or business owners or brands in this space care about this type of messaging? Well, number one, for the obvious reason that ideally and hopefully this is something that we all deeply care about ourselves. But the second piece is that as Jeremy likes to say, Jeremy Jones, our founder, likes to say, it's like, hey man, the hero is no longer the person that drops the sickest line or hugs the biggest cliff. It's the person that can do that and also stands for something. And as our results show, that is also true for brands and business. The consumer and the outdoor community member no longer sees alignment on climate as a nice to have for the brands that they support and the brands that they're going to show loyalty towards, but it's really a core requirement for values alignment. So I want to just quickly say, give it shout out and thanks. This presentation and our ability to release the findings and create the report are thanks to REI, Burton, and Bank of the West, three partners that have actually internalized a lot of the messaging in this report into their own climate work. Now, the opportunity that we have in front of us is to leverage the passion for the lifestyle and that desire for alignment, values alignment that I mentioned earlier, with meaningful engagement from our community towards the political will that we need to drive systemic solutions to climate change. So we, critical to the question that we wanted to answer was the following. And the question was, there's 50 million people who identify as outdoor enthusiasts. That's a larger number than the combined voting population of all the major outdoor swing states. So what if we could turn even just 10% of them into members of a voting bloc and a civic engagement bloc that's ready to activate and mobilize on climate action and environmental protection? If they voted as a state, if us, the outdoor sports, the outdoor state, if we voted as a state, the outdoor state, we would be one of the most powerful constituencies in the country. That would make us more influential than the NRA and representing an industry with greater economic impact than pharma. So what we did is we hired two of the best research firms in the business to dig in and get the data that we needed to begin answering that question. We worked with the Artemis strategy group to do the quantitative research. They do a lot of quantitative research for big brands when they're doing product launches like Coca-Cola. And then we worked with the Neiman Collaborative, which has been a long time messaging firm in the social impact space. And what we asked them to do was, okay, we have an alliance of 150 athletes. We have large membership and large social media following. What they did and what we asked them to do is, over the course of 4 months, to interview dozens of our ambassadors. We conducted 6 focus groups as well. We conducted 6 focus groups in North Carolina, Michigan, and Utah. And we ran a quantitative survey with over 2,000 participants that was representative of multiple sports, demographics, and geographies. And what we then did is we ranked their personal thoughts of these participants and their priorities as relevant to climate change and looked at their willingness to actually take action. What it did is we then took that data, and that data helped us map how the threats that they see to our lifestyles can serve as motivators to action, but also what are some of the practical and psychological obstacles towards engagement. So our hope is that by decoding the psychology of decision making, we can leverage effective messaging that will help us shift norms, drive active participation, and help build a movement that will advance resilient policy solutions to climate change and the climate change challenge. So let's start with some relevant demographic breakdown and personal perceptions that came out of the research. First, 90% of the members of the outdoor community think that most or all of climate change is real and is caused by human activity. So that's the good news. We don't have to convince people any longer that the science is real, that climate change is real, that the science is accurate. And that is, this applies regardless of whether they are ardent. And by ardent, we mean people that make life and lifestyle choices and decisions based on their ability to practice and have access to their sport. Or avids, which are what a lot of us refer to as weekend warriors. So it also included 47% of those who identified as Republicans, 82% who identified as Democrats, and 66% of those who identify as independents. So why is this relevant and important? Because while our research showed that outdoor enthusiasts don't all self-identify as liberal or Democrat, the 90% that I mentioned does translate to a significant majority of people, regardless of party affiliation, who, even when adjusted for that party affiliation or political perspective, it shows us that the majority do care about climate change, or do believe that climate change is real and human caused. It also shows that there's still significant gains to be made in terms of the importance ranking of the issue across party lines for the entire outdoor state. And so one of the challenges has been that traditionally climate change messaging has been perceived as overly partisan. We have been guilty of that at POW, and that's something that we need to very actively work to change and adjust. So, and why is that? Because partly it's in a fractured political climate when our consumers and our members are overwhelmed by information and heated rhetoric. They actually move away from the big solutions. They move away from the big policy solves, the big legislative conversations, the big picture thinking, and they decide to go pretty small and personal. So 78% of people surveyed listed recycling, reducing waste, and picking up litter at the top of the list of actions that they take to protect the climate and the environment. Now, if you are sorry, I'm getting a message here. If you're an industry executive if you're a lobbyist for the fossil fuel industry, you are stoked about this statistic, because what it does is it actually shifts the responsibility from the main polluters, the 50 companies in the world that are responsible for 80% of carbon emissions, and it shifts it to ourselves. It shifts it to the consumer. It shifts it to the individual. And by doing so, it also shifts the focus from large policy solutions to individual actions, which, while important, are not enough to actually address climate change. What we've seen is during the last year during the last year of the pandemic, a lot of people have asked me, well, hasn't that been good for carbon emission reductions? And in a way it was, but all of the behavior change that we achieved during the pandemic, the commuting from home, the less taking of flights, the drop in the oil consumption, et cetera, actually only achieved about a 15% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions globally. And that is far short of the 50% reduction that we need by 2035 or 80% reduction that we need by 2050 if we are to stay within that 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius that the international science community is telling us is necessary. So behavior change is important, but what we really need, and most important lever that we need, is we need actual systemic policy shift. And so when our members, when our customers think that the best thing that they can do is to recycle, reduce waste, or pick up litter, there's a huge gap opportunity in what they can actually do to have a major impact, which is to actually get more involved in advocacy efforts. And so this is, but the good news here is that 75% of them realize that, and they want direction on how to do more. And they are looking to both advocacy brands and businesses as trusted brands as part of that solution. So here's where our collective opportunity really lies. By combining their desire for action and their need for direction with the cultural bond that adventure sports gives us, we can move from a space that presents climate advocacy as an abstract, separate issue to a message that effectively conveys the reality that advocating for the lifestyles that we love requires making climate advocacy a core component of that identity and of that lifestyle. So in a way, we need to move them from the thought that climate advocacy is something separate from their lifestyle into incorporating climate into lifestyle advocacy. So the obvious question then is, well, how do we go about doing that? How do we build that message? What we have here is a motivational pathway map. And I'm going to try and keep it relatively short and simple for the purposes of this presentation. But like I said, feel free to download our report. We go into a little bit more detail there, or reach out to us and we can share that with some of our partners. But basically what we did is we started by probing into the consequences that climate change impacts have on the ability to practice a sport. And what is the importance of those perceived consequences? So the impacts that resonated the most were those of extreme weather events, diminished snow, diminished land, and extreme heat. And what we saw is that the consequences that people found the most concerning were increased inconvenience in the ability to practice our sport, and a compromise of the ability for that lifestyle health, or for a healthy lifestyle, so less healthfulness, so to speak. But going beyond thinking through, okay, what are the impacts that people care about and what do they see as being the consequence, we want to dig a little bit deeper into what do those consequences actually generate in terms of emotions? What kind of emotions are triggered by considering those consequences? And that way for the majority of our survey respondents, and two of them really rose to this. There were several, but two of them really rose to the top as the primary consequences and emotional consequences. So one was a sense of loss of freedom, a sense of impingement. So not being able to practice a sport, and that accompanied by an increased cost and hardship to participate in the activities that bring people joy. And the consequences of that being also threats to health and a healthy lifestyle. And the second one was a sense of distress, a feeling of being let down. And while that sense of distress that what we're summarizing as a sense of distress was actually a complex set of negative emotions that were expressed by respondents, what was a common thread across all of those emotions was that most respondents were really motivated to overcome or avoid feeling that way. And so ultimately what we realize is that people can be motivated by two primary factors. One is avoiding the threat of losing the life balance that our sports provide, that are key to healthy lifestyles, and that includes time with family and friends, exercise, mental recharge, etc. And they're also really concerned that this lifestyle will not be available to their children or grandchildren. And so while we're going to touch base really quickly on what does that mean for messaging and message architectures, we can start to see here how each one of these possibilities or each one of these components would then be able to drive message architecture and drive messaging around our desire to engage our consumer in climate change advocacy. So the first thing that we realize is that we had it a bit backwards, or we've had it a bit backwards, particularly in the climate change and the environmental movement. For the last 40 years, we've tended to start talking about, first we talk about climate change and all of the science and what the impacts are and what all the statistics, and we've been hitting people over the head with numbers for the better part of 40 years to very little effect. And then we started talking about, okay, what do those impacts mean for people in general? What are some of the most affected people? And fail to make it really personal. And then we've moved from that to advocacy and specific campaigns, and then from that to politics and political messaging. What we see is that for the majority of people, at least in the outdoor sports community, who want to get engaged but have been turned off a lot by the political rhetoric, is that that's not the place to start. The place to start is really to start with the lifestyle. What does this mean to the individual that we're trying to speak to? What does this mean for their own lifestyle? Whether they're if we're speaking to the trail running community, what does climate change then mean? What do the impacts of climate change mean for your ability to practice your sport? Whether that be increased smoke or decreased air quality during fire season. If we're talking to snowboarders and skiers and the people in the snow sports community, what does it mean for your own lifestyle to have a shortened winter season, as many of us who are living in the Front Range of Colorado experienced this year? But then tying that impact to a specific place and locality so that we're making it local. And then connecting the dots in terms of what does that actually mean? Like, how is this being affected by climate change, and what are some of the climate change solutions that are available to avoid those impacts? And then moving from that to here's what you can do to affect those solutions. Here's what you can do to move those solutions forward with really clear pathways to action and civic engagement that are tied to those large-scale solutions, rather than this idea that changing our light bulbs or recycling is going to help us solve this really, really massive problem, and bringing it together as a collective and as the power of collective impact. So shortly, really, and I'm trying to summarize a lot of content into one slide, but basically, here's an example of that message architecture. The outdoor places that you love, where you escape to find and create your best self, are under threat from extreme weather. Climate change is making it harder and more expensive to do the sports that rock your world. POW, or substitute here, your brand, your business, helps you save your great escape by identifying cool solutions and advocating for their adoption. And while it may not save the whole world, it'll give you a fighting chance to save yours for generations to come. So that's a really simple message frame that encompasses a lot of the takeaways that we had. And obviously there's ways to build and expand on each one of these points, or customize for your particular brand or business. But some of the key takeaways that we came at is, it's when possible, avoid being overly political. And I know that for those of you that know the work that we've done in 2018 and 2020 might seem ironic coming from us. But for overall messaging and new audience engagement, it is important. Giving people confidence through climate experts. So as I said earlier, climate advocacy organizations are seen as reliable truth tellers. then respect the journey to activism. We need to respect where people are at and provide calls to action and engagement pathways that are not overwhelming. Embracing imperfect advocacy. This is one of my favorites. One of the most common themes that I hear when we're engaging with new brands or businesses is that there's a hesitation to step into the climate advocacy space, because we are concerned about our own climate impact, or we're concerned about our own supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. And really, the expectation from the consumer, from our customer, is not that we are perfect, or not that we are net zero, that we're completely net zero. The expectation is that we have the values, that we are reflecting the values in our message and making progress. And this idea of progress over perfection is something that we've really tried to message very strongly. We are making, it's better to get started imperfectly than waiting to be perfect to get started. An acknowledgement that the overall system is effed up, so that what we're doing is we're working to fix it, but that there are challenges along the way, but also making systemic solutions more personal. And so how do we tie, what are the benefits of electric transport in Park City, Utah? Well, it's not only that we're going to decrease, that electrifying our fleet is going to help with emissions, but it's also going to improve air quality. So what are those multiple value adds and value gains that really affect the individual as well? So as I said, I was going to try and keep this relatively short. I've gone on for about 20 minutes. If you want to get the executive summary of the full report, you can scan this QR code. It'll send you to our website. You can download it there. For the full report, feel free to reach out to Pao, and we can talk about how to get access to it. We'd be happy to do so. So what I'll do now is I'm glad to take a few minutes to I'm glad to take a few minutes to take any questions. I think if you have questions, I'd be glad to. I think I can add you to the panel. I'd much rather talk to somebody on the screen than. So I think I've got Dirk. Dirk, I'm going to try and add you to the screen now. Well, I just tried to add Dirk, but it doesn't seem. So let me stop sharing my screen to start. Oh, Jessica, I see you're in the chat. That's amazing. Jessica Klodnicki, the CMO at Skull Candy, and a Pao board member is on the chat, which is awesome to see. So I couldn't get Dirk on. So if you want to join, please ask to join, and I will try to add you from here. Yep. No worries. So can you speak about the connection between climate justice and social justice needing to work symbiotically? Yeah, absolutely. So in an effort to making deeper demographic and political gains. So there's a few things here. Teresa Baker from In Solidarity and I have been having this conversation over the last few weeks. And I think it's really important to consider the fact that the more people that we get into the outdoors who have traditionally not had access to the outdoors, the more that we work together to be more inclusive in outdoor participation, the more people that will start to really want to care for those landscapes, and will also will fall into these pathways of figuring out, how do I protect this wonderful experience that I've had, and how do I keep it from being threatened by the impacts of climate. So I think inclusivity in outdoor spaces tied to ardent recruitment for advocacy is incredibly important. And then obviously, I think most of us know that it is marginalized communities will be the ones that are the most affected by climate change, whether it's domestically in the US or overseas. It's people that can't afford to move away from coastal areas that are going to flood. It's people in most of the siting for coal-fired power plants, and for a lot of the highest emissions industries usually takes place are cited with in areas that are close to marginalized communities, where we're talking about the Houston shipping channel, or we're talking about power plants in Chicago. So okay, great. I think Dirk, you're on. Perfect. I'm going to I am not allowed to unmute you, so go for it.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. Well, I'm sorry a little bit late because I was sporting with my daughter, but I ran in a little bit late. But I really was anxious to join this session. I'm from the Netherlands, and I work at the University of Tilburg, and it's a social science and humanities oriented university. And I think it's really difficult to tap in all the values you guys are standing for to help our scientists. And what I especially do is I work at the knowledge transfer office. So I want to take the knowledge that has been built in our university and transfer that to our to society. And but all the brilliant ideas that they came up that they invent, I would love to see them more purpose driven towards a better environment. And I think it's really difficult. And maybe my question is how to turn a larger organization as a complex thing as a university, turn that into that the mindset of all people at all levels, flip a little bit towards more sustainable behavior. Is that?
Yeah,
Do you
thanks for
understand my question a little bit?
Yeah, I do. I think I do. And it's how do you turn a big organization, how do you get a big organization to actually turn towards incorporating values on climate and sustainability. I think it's a stepwise process. Like we don't go from 0 to 100 in no time. It's starting with those conversations, making it fun, identifying who are the people that might care about this, and figuring out what is the message for that is specific to that audience that will help turn the influencers. I think at POW, what we do is we do try and focus a lot of our efforts on decision makers. So what are the ways to access the decision makers that can help move to move the needle a little bit at a time. Again, it's this idea of progress over perfection, right? So I think it also depends on getting to know your audience. And the research that we did and what I'm speaking to here is very, very much centered and focused on the outdoor sports community. And so we know what it is that will motivate. Through this research, we found out what it is that can motivate people to action because it affects them very personally and things that they are very passionate about. So turning that passion into purpose. So I think understanding your audience is a key piece. So thanks a lot, Derek.
Ask one more question. It's a little bit what Nicole just asks: how to start our own local POW community, because the Netherlands doesn't officially have a POW community. Germany has, Austria has, but and I know there are a lot of winter fans in the Netherlands as well. So
yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Where can we turn to?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Let me answer for you and Nicole. So, Nicole, if you in the United States, we do have a local alliance program. So we have those. We have started those in several countries. We have one in Nevada. We have one in Washington State. We have one in New England. And so if you email info@protectourwinters.org with your question, they will direct you to our local volunteer coordinator, and that's the first step to start for the Midwest. We will be doing a lot more work in the Midwest, particularly in Michigan, in the coming years. And Dirk, for the Netherlands, it's and then for the Netherlands, it would be anywhere in if you email info, we do have a European coordinator that we could put you in touch with. Yes, there in Canada, we do have a POW Canada that's a pretty well established. It's a pretty well established chapter. So we could direct you. Yep, we could direct you to the right person there as well. Maddie, oh great, Maddie, you're on. Maybe you can copy and paste the POW Canada info page in the chat. That would be great. So I'm going to do a last scroll through the chat, make sure that I didn't blow anybody off. I think we've kind of covered it. Okay. Oh, yeah. Paul, you're on. That's awesome. Paul Marshall. Can you expand on how individuals/companies can start to do their own advocacy work within their communities, which may be outside of POW's purview at this time? Yeah, I think for individuals or companies, or particularly companies that don't fall within the scope of the work that POW does, I'd encourage you, actually, Paul, feel free to, I think the work that you're doing is fantastic, and feel free to link your website on here in terms of some, there are plenty of consultants that are available to do work on reducing your own carbon footprint within your supply chain. But most importantly, I think getting engaged, getting civically engaged, getting politically engaged, finding out, okay, for example, we have a major infrastructure bill package that's going to start moving through Congress here in the next few months. And there's a lot of debate as to how much of it should be what we call traditional infrastructure, so roads, bridges, and buildings, and how much of it should include climate solutions such as improvements to the grid, increasing the number of charging stations for electric vehicles, et cetera, becoming really informed on what are those proposed solutions that are going to start moving through Congress, and where do your elected representatives stand on this, and getting involved, getting engaged, and asking for their votes on some of these bills, or on supporting some of these solutions. Particularly if you're a business owner or an employer in your state, or in your community, that carries a lot of weight, actually. Okay, wow. I don't know about you all, but I'm really ready to start doing in-person events again and actually see people's faces and interact in person. This has been weird for the last year. Okay. All right. Well, I think that about covers it. So I guess I'll give another 30 seconds or so if anyone has any last questions or wants to join. Or wants to join on the panel, and if not, I will let you all go to either the next session or wherever you're headed next. Does POW offer internships? Yes, we do have internships. Yep. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. It's really been a pleasure. I know we try to cover a lot of information in a relatively short amount of time. Appreciate you joining and participating. And yeah, definitely feel free to contact us.